Hello and welcome to Applicata Biblia. My name is Mark. Thank you so much for stopping by as we get a little bit into God's Word. Again, we are continuing in the series, A Walk Through the Bible. We are in lesson 51. We are continuing with the prophets. Today we're going to be talking about Amos and Isaiah. Now, that's a lot. Okay, just to say we're going to look at Isaiah today. We're not going to have an in-depth look at him. That would take months to do a proper study. All I'm doing is touching on some of the things that they do and some of the important things they say and the why of why they're in the scriptures and how it applies to you and me today, right? Which is Jesus, right? If there was no Jesus, there would be very little reason for us to have any sort of belief in this system at all, because the thought would be that's their God. But when Jesus comes along, he makes it clear that God is everybody's God. That was really one of the main messages he had. So, lesson 51. We're going to look at Amos, and again, I put dates on here. I did that originally when I wrote this up. And the more you look at dates, a lot of times, the more you can question them. I haven't checked to see how close these are to Scott Nichols and Nick Nichols' timeline. I'm probably way off. But again, that's not the point of this study. The point of the study is not to get them in exact order or anything like that. We're just looking at what they're saying and doing and know that they're usually prophesying to kings. So the book of Amos is divided into 4 sections. The first 3 concerning judgments against the Gentile nations, Israel, and Judah. And the 4th section deals with the restoration of the kingdom. Now, here's that restoration of kingdom thing that's very important, right? Israel, we talked about this history. Israel finally becomes this big nation after just being, big clans and families. And, they just struggle all the time before they have kings. And then they get kings and they're still struggling. And then they have this big rise to have this big influence in the region. And then that wanes and they're going to be taken away by superior armies and superior nations in that sense. And so they're looking for deliverance. This has been, that's their history. They always are looking for deliverance from God. And so in this context, they're looking for the Messiah. And of course, they're looking for this physical kingdom. And when Jesus comes along, he's kind of like, no, that's not it. I am the Messiah, but that's not the kingdom that God wants established. And we will get to what that means. So again, there is this prophecy that is immediate, it has immediate meaning, and it has a futuristic meaning, a more spiritual meaning when the Christ comes, Jesus. So Amos, right? Chapter 4 deals with judgments against Israel. What did God do to Israel to convince them to return to him? So I think we're just going to go, I just summarized each one of these verses that I'm going to be putting up here. So, and these are judgments against his people, right? Against Israel. And if I kind of skimmed through it, I haven't studied it in a while, but he kind of talks a little bit about Israel and Judah, but he kind of seems to be talking about Israel. So there are these judgments. In verse 6, there's going to be the judgment of hunger. In 7 and 8, he withholds water, right? And so you're going to see these crop failures, and you're going to see thirst, right? So people are going to be struggling. And again, verse 9, he continues with crop failures and the plague of locusts coming down on these crops. And, starvation back then was a very real thing. We are so blessed today to have kind of mastered agriculture in so many different ways. And I think we've messed up in some ways, but we're kind of getting back to better practices. But we have really come a long way scientifically to grow food that feeds the world. I mean, we've like doubled our population in 50 years. So, but back then, a crop failure might mean people actually die. This is very an existential threat during that time. Just a couple of hundred years ago, even here in this country, that kind of thing could have happened. In verse 10, there are failures in battle. Obviously, God's giving them over to their enemies. And in verse 11, they'll be given up and turned over for burning. Now these are all the results of idolatry, and I'm just going to keep hammering on that fact because that is the repeating issue. It's been the repeating issue since forever. It's just idolatry over and over and over again, and then God just says, I'm done. I'm done protecting you. I'm done blessing you, just like I said I would back in Deuteronomy. So the warning is that they are to prepare to meet your God. And that had to be terrifying. Prepare to meet your God. He is the authority of everything that good or bad happens to them. And that was their warning. So one of the issues that we see here lists the ways that that we as a nation can avoid the wrath of God. Well, obviously, right? A nation that does not acknowledge Jehovah God and just goes off on its own is working outside of the sphere of God's protection and blessings. Now, it doesn't mean that God doesn't bless them, but these people are a lot on their own. And what I mean by that is God sets things forth in the natural world that we can provide things for ourselves. And we've learned how to master a lot of those things. And so because we're able to do that, we kind of forget who God is. We see nations all over the place do it. And they walk away from God and they accept a lot of things that God says are non-acceptable. And that's kind of a scary proposition when you think about it. We need to seek him out, learn his heart, learn his ways. He's just, he's kind, he's merciful, he's ready to protect. He's especially the less powerful, and anybody who seeks him. It's important to see all of these sorts of things about God, that he is very much ready to be a God to a people. But this is it's hard to iterate exactly what this is. His love, I'll say this, his blessings are conditional. So we have to remember that. His love is not conditional. He will always love us. He'll always be ready for us to come to him. But it's on his terms. And that's what people don't like. Sorry, I can't change that. In fact, I don't think I want to change it. Because if it's on people's terms, we are a bunch of flakes. Even the best of us are really flaky. And that's just an unacceptable way to think about things. Putting God at the head of everything is really important for nations and people's personal lives. Okay, Isaiah. The prophecies of Isaiah are numerous. Okay, he's got a very long writing in there. I would suggest, I would suggest reading all of these, reading through them. I've read through them, and I don't remember a lot of what they say until I reread it again. And Isaiah is really prolific. To summarize, Isaiah's prophets covered kings, judgments against nations, the rise of nations, the rise of kings, the exile of God's people, and that's important for when Jesus comes. The return from exile, and Christ, among other things. Isaiah's prophecies were accurate, and he even named a king in which his words or God's words come to pass. As always, that's always how it works. So I asked the student to read about Jesus, the Christ, in chapter 53 and consult your timeline about how many years was this written before Christ. 500 years, 600 years, something like that. So it's a long time before Christ. And my reason for pointing that out is because we don't understand the patience of God, right? God gives mankind some 4,000 years or longer to understand his desperate need for him and for Jesus. And what an awesome plan God has about that. So what part of this chapter impresses you most? Be ready to explain and why. And so I'm not going to read this, but I would suggest you maybe pause this video and read this passage, right? Read Isaiah 53. I'm just going to summarize it. So it's about Jesus in my mind. There's just no doubt about that. He comes from the dry ground. In other words, this person is coming from a place where you wouldn't expect good fruit. It's very it's like it's describing something very unfertile, building something very beautiful. It comes from dry ground. Now I said it's beautiful, but it's not majestic. It's not like very comely. Isn't something that everybody goes, oh, look at him. He's, Jesus, he fulfills that. He's basically born in a barn. He's not esteemed by men, right? He wasn't a son of a king, although he was in the lineage of David, right? He's not esteemed by men. He bears our afflictions. Jesus gave up his throne to be a man and understand the things that we go through. He bears the cost of our sin, and the cost of our sin because we sin, because I sin and have sinned. The penalty for that could be death. And he hung on the cross so that I could find forgiveness. He redeemed me back to God. He bought me back to God. That's what redemption is. He is the sacrifice for us. Now, this is absolutely about Jesus. And remember, this is many hundreds of years before he shows up. We're accused of wickedness, and he takes that upon himself. He is more than willing, God is more than willing to let his son go through this. So it shows the love of God at the same time. He's letting his son suffer for our behalf. Because through it, victory over sin, victory over death will be made possible. And so really that's there's so much more to Isaiah. And there's a lot of little things you can get into about what kings he was dealing with and all that sort of thing. But that, for me, is the main part. That's 30,000 foot view looking down and going, why was Isaiah there? Well, Isaiah was there to talk to the people who were under oppression for sinning against God. Again, it's idolatry again. But he leaves with this great hope. And Jesus is the ultimate hope. That's the forever thing that happens whenever you see the statement, forever, eternal. something like that. It only happens with Jesus. When God is talking through his prophets about somebody coming and doing something for eternity, or coming from eternity, or bringing people back to God forever, only Jesus the Christ does it. And it stops with him. Joseph Smith ain't nothing. He is a nobody. He made it up. All these other religions, people make it up because they want some sort of fame or something. I don't know what it is. And I don't, apologize if you're Mormon. But Joseph Smith, I don't even know why I said that. I don't know. It just popped in my head. He was evil, and you need to rethink that. And I would just, if you are a Mormon, I don't even know why I'm saying this, but if you are a Mormon, I would just suggest you put down your Mormon Bibles and you get a real Bible and you just study it. Because there was no more prophecy needed. The whole thing about it being corrupted, blah, 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 is made up. You believe something somebody just made up. Anyway. Think it and rethink it and study it for yourself. Thank you so much for stopping by. We're going to get into some more of these prophets and what they did and the why, and it's usually and always about the immediacy of oppression, but the bigger picture is about Jesus, right? See you later.